How important is the Chattahoochee River to the community? The Chattahoochee River has a 430-mile stretch. It's a water source for over 3 million people. It administers 450 million gallons of water a day. And finally, it provides more than 70% of drinking water for the Metro Atlanta residents. So, what's happening to the river? The river is an important natural resource for the community, but unfortunately, erosion and sedimentation are continuously affecting the river. So, what is erosion, you might ask?
Basically, there are 4 types of erosion. There's water, wind, ice, and gravity. So any process that can move soil is erosion. So wind can cause erosion because it's moving soil particles. Ice melting or glacial erosion can take place. But those processes are usually very slow and don't have significant impacts to water quality. What we're primarily concerned about is water erosion, where the force of water is detaching soil particles. So in doing that, water can detach soil particles in many different fashions. Rain erosion, or erosion just caused by rainfall, hits the soil surface and then can run across the soil, and it detaches soil on its initial splash, so we call that splash erosion. And then once it starts to run off, it can start to cause sheet erosion. So as water is flowing like a sheet across the soil surface, it can start to erode soils, and we call that sheet erosion. Then there's also rill and gully erosion, where that runoff can concentrate and then it starts to cut channels into the soil. So when we start to see eroded channels in soil, then we call that rill and gully erosion. Okay. And then once all that stormwater makes its way into the creeks and rivers, if you get too much storm flow and you get flood events, then we can start to see bank erosion taking place on the streams and rivers, and then all of those banks start to erode and dump more soil into the system. And water is a very powerful force, and if we're not controlling stormwater properly, then we're going to see erosion taking place in many different forms.
The two causes of erosion and sedimentation are either natural activities or man-made activities. Both forms of erosion impact the river, but natural erosion has minor and small negative impacts on the river. However, man-made erosion has infinite and accelerated negative impacts on the river. The primary human activities that cause erosion are construction and mountain biking.
The primary concern is when dealing with construction, because construction sites remove large amounts of vegetation over large amounts of land. So if you have a large box development coming in over a 50-acre site, you see 50 acres can be quickly stripped of all of its vegetation, and then that becomes a huge concern for soil loss and sedimentation occurring on that piece of property. The number one thing is just removing vegetation. If you're exposing bare soil to rainfall, you're accelerating erosion. So whenever that happens, you're going to have accelerated erosion.
By removing trees to build residential or industrial areas, the river is being exposed to forms of erosion. The economic crisis has caused construction rates to drop due to the decline in demand, but trees are still being removed from the river.
Well, for several years now I've been hearing the same numbers, and I'm sure that it's changed, but I hear that 50 acres of trees per day are being cut in this watershed, and that's a lot of trees being cut. Soap Creek is our only unit where mountain biking is allowed, and it's been allowed there for many years, and it has caused a huge issue with the trails because the wear and tear on the trails has taken many of the trails all the way down to bedrock. So if you bike out there, you've seen these areas where the sides of the trail are 2 or 3 feet higher than the trail itself, and you're actually riding on the bedrock. Another downside to mountain biking is that a lot of the trails were created because they wanted the fast trip straight down the hill. And so many of these trails lead straight down slope where the mountain bikers got the woohoo factor, but it also channelizes and makes the water follow straight down the slope. And redoing the trails out there, we follow the contours of the land so that the water cannot find that straight channel to follow and cut out. The storm, the gully washer would be
Gully
a
washer? Okay.
that comes in so hard that the water, the ground cannot absorb it. It's just so hard and fast that most of it runs off.
Yeah, I mean, the natural amounts of erosion that are eroded out of the soils are necessary for the natural health of our streams. Now, they need a certain amount of soils and sediments in the stream system. They have very important functions with the ecology of a stream, but the problem is when human activities accelerate that rate of erosion, then the streams can't handle that much soil, and then we start to see tremendous ecological and environmental damage.
There are many ways that an individual person or construction company can prevent erosion.
The main thing is to stay on the trails. And just be sensitive of the environment altogether. We do have bikers that will create ramps and jumps on the trails, and that causes issues because the trails are multi-use.
Dredging is the process where we remove soil particles from a water body. So erosion had taken place within the watershed. Sedimentation transported those eroded materials, deposited them in the creeks, streams, or reservoirs. And then with dredging, you can go in and try to physically take those back out of the water system, which is a very complex and expensive process to do. It's much easier to prevent the erosion from taking place on the land than it is to let it go into the water system and then try to remove it.
All construction is supposed to have BMPs, which are best management practices, and these are established through the NPDES system, which is the National Pollutant and Discharge, evaluation system. And they are regulations that are in place to help control this erosion. It's like the silt fences and the straw bales, but there's so few inspectors that it's really up to each builder or developer to put these in place.
The basic idea is to have something on that soil surface that's protecting it from rainfall, whether it's mulch, pine straw, grass, trees, or shrubs. As long as there's something there protecting that soil surface, then we're one step ahead of the game, and we're preventing that attachment, and then the soil particles can't transport and then make its way into our waterways. In the state of Georgia, we have a state law in place that was passed in 2003 that says that any person that's involved in land disturbing activities for construction has to be certified by the state of Georgia, because the state realizes that it's such an important problem, and that education is one of the most effective tools that we have in many of our different environmental programs.
The Upper Chattahoochee River Keeper has initiated a program to educate citizens about erosion and sedimentation.
The Get the Dirt Out program is a program initiated by Upper Chattahoochee River Keeper that has been adopted and implemented by many other water keeper groups within the Southeast. And it's a program where we educate people within the watershed, particularly citizens that are interested in protecting their waterways. Because most people know that sedimentation and erosion impacts our waterways one way or another. Most people don't know the extent and the damage that it causes. Buffers are a very important tool to prevent erosion and treat sedimentation. They are excellent filter strips adjacent to our waterways. So if we have polluted water that's flowing into the stream, if we have that vegetated filter strip that's filtering out the stormwater, it does an amazing job at improving the water quality before it gets into the stream. It also holds those creek and river channels in place, prevents erosion from taking place within the channels, and all of those trees provide shade that help keep the streams cool and prevent temperature pollution in our waterways, and that dramatically helps the ecology of the streams.
I wouldn't say the river is endangered. I would say it needs help. If nothing is done, we're going to lose a lot of resources.